Hi everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day it is that you are watching this. As you can see, I've got another guest with me today. If you don't instantly recognise him, which most of you will, but if you shut your eyes and listen to the voice, you would instantly know who it was. We have with us today Ewen Murray, the voice of golf as far as I'm concerned and most other people are concerned, works for Sky Sports, covers all the golf around the world. And I'm really pleased and thankful that you've come on today. Can I just ask you, the very first question I'm going to ask you is can you tell us what it was like growing up, having a dad who was a PGA professional? You played a lot of your golf at Edzell and Kirriemuir and Carnoustie, and you were very successful as a boy. You won the Scottish Boys and the World Junior Championships. Just tell us what it was like growing up, having a dad as a PGA professional and playing a lot of golf in these wonderful courses.
Well, Richard, I'd have to say I was very fortunate because it was a wonderful childhood. I spent all of my spare time at the golf club, Babberton, chipping and putting, waiting till 3:45 when the juniors were then allowed off. It was a bit different in these days. But I spent all my time there, and it was good for your parents as well because they knew where you were. They knew you were safe out there on the golf course. So I class myself as very fortunate to have enjoyed a childhood in sport as well. It kept you fit. And I must say I spent more time on the golf course than I did at school.
Fair point. What about the courses you played and your success in the Scottish Boys and the World Junior Championship? How did that come about?
The great thing about the Lothians is they used to have a lot of junior tournaments as well as senior tournaments also. Each course wanted to have one. I remember there was a boys' event at Newbattle, which was a lovely course. There was also places like Kingsnow, just down the road from Babberton. So there was always something to play in. There was also some weekly events like the Dunbar Boys, the Ely Boys. I played in over there as well, just the other side of the water. So I was fortunate. I was pushed into competitive golf from an early age. And Ratho Park was another one. I remember that was the first one I played in when I was 10 years of age. It was won by Bernard Gallagher. The PJ Redmond Trophy, if my memory serves me right. 292s I had off 24 handicap. So I started at a young age. And by the time I got to 16, I was ready to go out and compete. I lost the final of the British Boys the year before when I was 15. I wasn't very tall. I was less than 5 feet. So I didn't hit the ball very far. And they were great days. I remember playing Sam Torrance in the quarterfinals. I felt I should have won the final. I was 1 up and 2 to go, 36-hole final, and didn't manage to do that. So from these last few words, you can see I had a great opportunity to play regularly, compete regularly. And it took me to the age of 16 when I had probably the best year.
So going back to your father, he was a great friend of one of the Brunsfield professionals, Finlay Morrison, at the time. Finlay, as most people who were members of Brunsfield who are of a certain age, Finlay was a wonderful man. I had many lucky conversations with Finlay. He used to pop into the shop. What's your recollection of your dad and Finlay? And Finlay talked very highly of your father. So what's your recollection of Finlay Morrison?
Finlay was like an uncle to me. I mean, I used to call him Uncle Finlay. And you know what it's like in town in the winter. Sometimes the snow lies and it stays there for a week or two. And we used to take ourselves down to Gillen or Lough Ness, Dunbar, North Berwick, where the snow didn't settle. It was certainly very cold, but we had many great days there. Finlay fell in love with the Western Isles, the Outer Hebrides, and my mother was from Stornoway. My mother met my father at Gleneagles when Jimmy was assistant pro there. My mother worked in the hotel. And she didn't speak English until she was 18, 19 years of age. Finlay, it was the other way around. He didn't speak Gaelic until he was probably about 75 or 80. And I used to laugh when he'd come over for tea and my mother and him would start conversing in Gaelic, which really annoyed my father. But it annoyed my mother as well, because Finley's Gaelic was so bad that she couldn't understand it either. But he fell in love with that part of the world, and he had a great last 20 years or so of his life. Went up to the Isle of Harris, the Isle of Lewis, and all up in that area, places like Borv, which is right up at the butt of Lewis. And he just took to that way of life. He was very laid back, Finley. Everything he did, he was very laid back. But I remember with great fondness all of the games that we had. And sometimes we were joined by a chap called Hamish Ballingall, who was pro at King's now, and pro at one or two other courses in Scotland as well. Hamish was, I think I'm right in saying, he was the 1938 Scottish PGA champion. And he was a magnificent player. So for me to be invited to play with my dad and these two was a joy. I mean, you didn't sleep the night before. You were that keen to get out there and try and play your very best. I was lucky to have them as company. And they made you grow up a little quicker as well. They were three fine gentlemen.
Yeah. You turned pro in 1971. And your first big win was in 1977 at the Northern Open. You also had wins at the Zambian and Nigerian Open as well. What was it like playing on tour? Because you made it onto the European Tour. What was it like playing on tour in the 70s and 80s? Because there must have been some phenomenal characters back then.
There certainly was. It was a very different world to the world. And I turned pro at just about in my 17th birthday, because back in these days, if you didn't go to the right school in the amateur game, you didn't progress. I know that might sound very strange to the new generation, but that's the way it was then. I was talking to Howard Clark a couple of days ago about this. At Dunbar in the British Boys in 1969, we were 14 years of age, Howard and myself, and we played in what was called a trial for the Scottish boys team. And Howard shot 68 and I shot 69, which was the two best scores, and we didn't get picked for the team. Howard went to a very similar school in Leeds as I did up at Curry. And that was the reason for turning pro early, because I couldn't really see that changing. It may have done, I could have been wrong. So thrust into the professional world at 17 years of age, my first trip was to Africa. And there was 6 weeks there at Kenya, 3 in Zambia, there was Zimbabwe, we played Nigeria, we played the Ivory Coast as well. And that was tough because I wasn't ready. I wasn't fully developed to be able to perform properly against proper players. I would say the likes of Brian Barnes and Tommy Horton, Malcolm Gregson, Guy Hunt, a lot of top players, Bernard Hunt as well, Brian Waits would have been another. So that first year was very difficult. And I left Baberton, I left Edinburgh and went to Walton Heath as assistant. And the idea was to have 2 or 3 years there as assistant and then have another go at playing full-time professional golf. While I was assistant, I had 2 weeks in the shop, 2 weeks teaching and 2 weeks playing on the European Tour. But if you didn't finish in the top 10, you weren't really going to make any money. And the total prize fund in 1972 for the year, this is total for the year for all the tournaments, was 1 million. Wow. £1 million.
Wow.
So it was tough. I was glad I went to Walton Heath. It took away a little bit of the desire because I enjoyed it so much. And I became tournament pro there in 77 when Ken McPherson, who was actually assistant across the road from me at the Royal Burgess many moons ago, Ken went to Kingswood, which was near Walton Heath, and he became the full pro. So when that happened, I became the tournament pro, and from 77, I played full time throughout the season.
And were there any characters? And firstly, when you say you didn't go to the right school, you did go to the right school because I went to Curry High School as well. But were there any outstanding characters back then, or any little stories you could tell about some of the characters back then?
I could tell a lot of stories. I'm not sure those who are still with us would be very happy about it. But also in that era was Eric Brown and Ronnie Shade. Norman Wood was a great pal as well. Stories-wise, no. We just went about our business and we played. And the great thing about the European Tour from the very beginning was the camaraderie of it, and that still remains the way today. It's very different from the PGA Tour. But Ronnie Shade was a great friend. Of course, his dad was pro Duddingston. Eric was very close to my father. Eric eventually lived in Belmont Road, I think it was, in Juniper Green. So I used to see a fair bit. Harry Bannerman was another great character then. I enjoyed Harry's company. And Bernard Gallagher had just won the Order of Merit on the European Tour in 1969. So they were my friends. Brian Barnes was probably the biggest character. I remember playing with him just before I turned pro at Dalmahoy. It was my first European Tour event. I was still at school. And I qualified at Ratho Park. And we went over to Dalmahoy for a practice round, myself and a friend who was caddying, and we bumped into Bob Turns. Sam had already turned pro then, so he was playing. And our manager at that time was a guy called Derek Pillage, or Sam's manager. And he organised a game for Sam and I against Sir Bob Charles and Gary Player. Now you can imagine the scene on the first tee, and here's Sam and I having two puppies just there at school and larking around, and here we are playing with two major champions. And we had a great game. We decided to have a game, and we were 2 down and 3 to go. Sam chipped in at the 16 from the 10th tee. I hit a driver at 17 and got it on the green, the driver ball 17. And Gary Player and Bob Charles made a 3 right in front of the clubhouse to beat us 1-up. So that was the start of the week. There was 2 cuts in these days. There was a cut after 36 holes and a cut after 54. And I made the first cut, and I was drawn with Brian Barnes. Now, Brian was 26 years of age at the time. And he disappointed me in many ways because he wasn't trying very hard. There was a Pro-Am the next day at Downfield, and the first prize in that Pro-Am was 2,000. And where we were in the field of the WD and HO Wills at Dalmahoy wasn't going to pay £2,000. So Brian started playing par 3s with 3 woods when it was really on their 9 iron, and having bets with the galleries and how many pints if he could hit the green with a 3 wood. And I remember one of them was the 15th at Dalmahoy. He missed the cut. I made the cut, the second one, played the last day. Brian went to Downfield and won the 2,000 quid. So even at 26, he was well clued up on what went on. The amazing thing was that Brian's been my next door neighbour for 30 years until his passing at the end of last year. So from that very day at 16 years of age, still at school, at Dalmahoy, on the European Tour, I met a lifelong friend.
Well, I mean, some of the stories with Brian Barnes are legendary, and you're lucky enough to have known him for a long, long time. And so let's just move a little bit to your commentary career. In 1989, I think it was, you went to Sky Sports to commentate on golf. Why do you think you've lasted so long doing that? I know, because you're brilliant at it, but what, in your opinion, how have you lasted so long at the premier position within Sky Sports Golf? And how much fun do you have with the team?
Well, it was difficult at first because there was a phone call in Brian Barnes' pro shop at West Chiltington in West Sussex. And Brian was having a fairly heavy lunch, so not much food involved, but a fairly heavy lunch. And I picked the phone up, and it was a Scots chap called Andrew Miller. And Andrew said, I was hoping to talk to Brian because I need someone to do the commentary for the Dubai Desert Classic. And I said, well, I'll do it. Just like that, bold as brass, not really thinking anything was going to come of it. He said, fine, I'll send you an air ticket. The fee will be £500 for the 4 days, So off I went. I had no idea what television was about. I mean, the only thing I knew about television was cameras on the golf course when you played, when the tournaments were covered by television. And I got to know some of the sound guys and the camera guys, but apart from that, nothing. So off I went, and we had a presenter called Richard Coram, and he was the manager of the Human League. If you may remember, "Don't You Want Me, Baby," or something like that. Anyway, and he was working in Dubai, and he was the presenter, and I was the commentator solo. We had Arabic cameramen, Arabic producers and directors. So I had all this Arabic in your ear. And after the first hour, Hamid Mubarak, his name was, he says, "How's things going? Do you think we're doing okay? Because we haven't covered golf before." And I said, "Well, we kind of need to see the ball, because all we saw was the swings and nothing else." Oh, he says, "We can sort that out." By the weekend, the quality of their coverage was pretty much as good as we know coverage today. They were outstanding. When I went home, 6 hours, by the way, it was on your own, listening to all this Arabic. And I remember getting on the plane thinking, that's not quite as easy as I thought it might be. So when I got home, Sky Sports at that time was Eurosport. That was their sports station. And they bought the pictures with the commentary on it from Dubai. Then they acquired some tournaments, and they asked if I would do the commentary on it, which of course I was delighted to do, because at this point I'd lost my card. I lost my card in 1989.
Yeah.
I was then put with a producer called John Colleen, who was a journalist in Birmingham. Best thing that ever happened. He knocked, not all, but a lot of the rough edges off me and encouraged me and said, "Keep this, you did that well, you didn't do this too well, you need to get rid of that." And I spent 2 years with John doing an instructional program called Get Your Handicap Down, which was very successful on Sky Sports. And then Sky Sports got the PGA Tour. So I kind of fell into that on the first day with the likes of Andy Gray, Richard Keys, Eddie and Steve, who used to do the rugby. And I remember walking into the Sky's headquarters, West London, and they had 88 people. They now employ over 11,000. So to be able to grow with the channel, to be given the chance, to be given the opportunity to develop your own style, I was tremendously lucky. But to answer your original question, longevity definitely was John Colleen, the producer I had for 2 years. He was an exceptional man, great sense of humour, which is why the instruction series was so successful, because that can be schoolmasterish instruction, as you well know. You're telling people how to do things. He found a way of doing that with humour. So I think that was one of the biggest breaks I had. And I've been lucky to have a lot of good producers from there on. Commentators need producing, otherwise they can run away with their own ideas. But I've been very lucky to be kept in check and told nicely, not damagingly, but nicely, that you need to move your style on. You know, you don't need to be humorous all the time. You don't need to be serious all the time. So I was very lucky to have these people in my ears while I was talking, while I was watching the golf. So a combination of many things.
So with all the different co-commentators that you've had, I mean, you've had some phenomenal names on with you. Has there been anybody that you thought, "Oh, I wish I could have done it a little bit longer with them," or "I really enjoy spending time chatting away with them"?
Well, I've had over 200 co-commentators since 1992, according to Sky, and I think that's probably fairly accurate. Enjoyed my time with Bruce Critchley. We were total opposites. Bruce was the ultimate amateur golfer and the ultimate professional broadcaster, a wordsmith. So I enjoyed my time very much with him. The most recent, obviously, is Rich Beem, which has been fairly successful in certain parts of the world. I'm not sure it is over in Texas, because they know Rich Beem better than I do. But that's been good. I think if I look back, I would have liked to have spent more time with Sergio Garcia, who came in and did some commentary with us. He was exceptional. He was the best of all the guests we had. And of course, Jack Nicklaus at the Masters. And I've just written a piece on Sky at the weekend. I had a T-shirt on the day he came in because I was feeling a bit nervous, and I was never going to be seen in vision. And I thought, I'll dress down. And I'd forgotten Jack was coming in for half an hour. And of course, the door opens, and there's the crisp white shirt, the yellow Masters tie, and this beautifully, impeccably tailored green jacket, which he slung over the edge of the seat and said, "How you doing? You and I've been looking forward to this. Talk about the golf. Sit here." And I think he stayed for an hour and a quarter.
Wow.
And that I could have had 5 or 6 hours of that, and I'm pretty sure the viewers could too. His knowledge of Augusta National and the Masters was just outstanding.
Well, it's interesting you say that because there was a repeat on the other night, and I turned it on and I heard yourself and Jack Nicklaus, and I thought his knowledge. He was even talking about the way they cut the grass, and so the ball didn't run, and it was incredible. Can I just ask you, with the situation we find ourselves at the moment, or the unfortunate situation where there are no tours being played, but the plan is to move the American majors to the end of the year. Where do you think we are? Do you think we'll even get these played? And where does the European and US tours go from here?
It's a very good question, and one I don't think anyone knows the answer to. I can see the Masters making it, but I'm no expert in a scientific field, and this pandemic that we're going through, it could last a year, it could finish in 3 or 4 weeks, nobody knows. But I think that has an opportunity of going ahead. I applaud the Royal and Ancient for pulling it and just saying, no, there'll be no Open Championship this year. I think a lot of viewers on television, your own viewers here, people on radio as well, they don't understand just how much goes into putting on the Open Championship and how long it takes. The preparation for the Open Championship begins the day after the previous one's just finished. And here we are, we're now at middle of April. We were looking at the middle of July for the Open, and everyone thinks, well, we still could have done that. I think if we had gone ahead and tried to do it, we would have had a diluted Open Championship, which I don't think anyone wants. Starting back in 1860, it has the tradition, it has the history, and we expect the Open to be as it is every year. I think had we gone ahead, and I don't think it would have been the Open as we know it. I can see the Masters being the Masters as we know it, minus the azaleas in November. I can see that happening because the weather is quite similar. You also have a smaller field in the Masters, probably somewhere around 95 players, whereas the Open's 156, and you need all the daylight hours to be able to get that 156 players round. It's a championship that's played from the first tee, not 2 tee starts. Had we gone later in the year, reduced field, 2 tee start. That's not the Open. And I feel the same way with the PGA and the US Open. If you look at the 2 Opens, US and our Open, or the Open, there's also a qualifying process. In America, they have sectional qualifying, which goes on to final qualifying. How are you going to manage to do that? How are you going to manage then to make the field up? And if you don't, it takes away the name Open. Open means if you're good enough, you can go and have a bash at qualifying. And you get the fairy tale stories that we've had down the years from the Open Championship and the US Open. So that would be lost. And the PGA is done pretty much straight off the world rankings. Now, we haven't been playing, so the world rankings are going to be those from the first week in March. And if you're going to play it in August, are we going to get much golf before then? Are these rankings going to change? Probably not. So I think the R&A did exactly the right thing and saying, we'll go to Royal St George's next year. It'll be the 149th Open Championship. And the following year, we'll return to St Andrews and celebrate the playing of the 150th. So we'll see what happens, but I think the Masters has a chance. I'm not sure about the other 2.
That is a really insightful description of how you see it, and again, everybody that's watching it will really, really appreciate that. That's my main questions over. I have a couple of quick fires, which you might not like, but I hope you're going to give us an honest answer. First one, I can't believe I'm asking you this. David Livingstone or Nick Doherty?
David Livingstone, yes, I didn't hear the question.
Was it David Livingstone or Nick Doherty?
I'm not getting that for some reason. It's just breaking up.
The question between who's your favourite presenter, is it David Livingstone or Nick Doherty?
Nick's very young in his career. I'm not sure you ever feel comfortable in television until you've maybe been there 25 years. I don't think he ever mastered it because I think it's an imperfectible art. David never used autocue. David was, what you saw with David was him sitting up during the night and thinking about what he was going to say. He would obviously know the running order of the program, but he would get all that in there. And you're talking about from two different eras. You're talking about David, journalistic background in Glasgow, worked for Sky in the first year on football. He was the touchline reporter for the SPL. So two very different jobs as well. I mean, Nick's now got his Sky card where you can press buttons and up comes things and you can lead yourself to them. In David's world at the beginning, that was very different. So I would say they're two different skills, and both produced them fairly well, I would say. So you didn't get an answer there, did you?
That was so diplomatic. That was absolutely brilliant. Next one is a European Tour or US PGA Tour?
If I was playing, European Tour for sure. I like the fact they play in different countries, different grasses, different climates, completely different golf courses in some ways. America's pretty much one-dimensional. It's the same question that's asked every week, but the money is there, the atmosphere is there, the fans are there. They put on fantastic events. And any of your viewers that have been to a PGA Tour event, it's an experience. You go there, you can have your drink, you can have your burger, you can go and follow this. They've got electronic scoreboards everywhere telling you exactly how the player's been doing from the time he started. It's a tremendous success story, the PGA Tour. But if I was a player, it would definitely be the European Tour. Much more together.
Brilliant. I read somewhere that your favourite country in the world is Buenos Aires. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but if you had the choice, would you rather stay in Edinburgh or Buenos Aires?
Oh, I think I'd stick with Old Reeking. I'm pretty sure I would. But the reason I said that, and I remember I said it one day, I was at the end of an 8-week tour, okay. and I'd been in Houston, I'd been in New Zealand, Bangkok, Australia, South Africa, and the last one was Buenos Aires. And on the final day, the World Cup finished. So I said to the receptionist in the hotel, "Where's the best steak restaurant within walking distance of where I was staying?" And she told me where it was, and I ambled down there, and I said, "I want the best steak. I want the best bottle of wine you have in the restaurant." And then I immediately thought that might be a mistake. That might be a big mistake and a very expensive mistake. Anyway, the steak came out and it could have fed 4 comfortably. It was like a roast joint on Sunday. The wine was outstanding, which was still beginning to worry me a bit, even though I was getting through it quite nicely. And the bill came at the end and it was £18 for the lot, including the wine. I got outside and the water's very choppy there. We're Montevideo, just on the other side of the water. And the cool air sort of hit me a little bit. So I got a taxi back and then flew home the next day. But it was 8 weeks and it was the perfect way to end 8 weeks. So Buenos Aires became a big favorite of mine.
Quite right. Sounds like a fantastic meal. So my very last question, and I don't know if it's going to be a tough one, but the question is, The greatest ever golfer, in your opinion?
That's another excellent question. I think the greatest ever champion was Jack Nicklaus. I was fortunate to play with Gary Player on several occasions, with Arnold Palmer on several occasions. Both the times I played with Palmer, first 2 times he won the tournament. One was in Brazil, and the other one was La Manga on the European Tour. I think it was around 1975. So I would put Gary in there, I would put Jack in there. The greatest golfer I ever played with or have seen, now you're all going to think I'm going to say Tiger Woods. I never got the chance to play with Tiger. Some of the things he's done has been extraordinary, out of this world. Seve Ballesteros comes to mind. I don't know what it is with Seve. He was a very close friend of mine off the golf course. We played quite a few times on the golf course. There was just something about Seve. When he stood on the first tee, you felt, not really sure if I should be here. Now, if you've played with a lot of great players, I never felt that with Gary. Maybe because Gary's been a close friend for a long time. Arnold, I felt a little bit like that, you know, when you saw Arnold, you couldn't hear a word he was saying, a bit like me, but deaf. But when Seve stepped on the tee, you thought, this boy is something special. And the first time I played with him was in the under-25s at Evian. So, I mean, Seve was 16, so I think Seve's a couple of years, or would have been a couple of years younger than me. And I said, he had a pair of filthy shoes on, and he had a scruffy bag with 7 clubs in it, and the woods were all chipped. And so I said, do you carry him for? And then he says, me no carry, he says, me jugadori, me player. And off we went. I thought he was standing there, actually waiting on his man to come with a proper golf bag, and I didn't get the clubs, and I saw the shoes, and I thought, well, don't be a caddy. After 3 holes, now Seve's 16 at this point, after 3 holes, you just knew that this lad was destined for greatness, and not just as a golfer, but full of charisma, full of cheek, great smile, wonderful physique, confident. So I should go Tiger because of his amazing achievements over the course of the last 25 years or so. But I'm going to go Severiano Ballesteros Sota to give him his full name. He was a very special individual.
Well, that is a great way to end the interview. I would agree. I think Seve's one of the greatest players ever. Ewen, thank you very, very much for doing this. I really appreciate you giving up your time.
Before you go, Bruntsfield, you started with Finlay Morrison.
Yeah.
What about Ian Anderson?
Ian Anderson was a little bit before my time. I never had the chance to meet Ian Anderson, but I heard stories of Ian. And I do believe he hit the ball a long way. That's pretty much what I heard. You tell me a little bit about Ian.
Ian was one of the longest hitters of his time, and his drives would have gone 245, 250, which back in the 60s was a healthy hit. He was the best driver of a golf ball that I think I'd seen, and not many have managed to surpass him. He was a gentle gentleman, and he used to come up to Barberton and play alongside my old man, and I would go out and play with Ian as well. Sometimes I played with Ian on his own. If he came up and he had a chat with my dad would say, why don't you go out and play 9 holes with you? And I would go out. And again, I was blessed to be brought up alongside people like Finlay Morrison, people like Ian Anderson. So for some of your older members who probably will remember Ian Anderson, he was an exceptional man as well. So your club's been blessed with great professionals, and it's on your shoulders for you to carry that up.
Well, I am trying very, very hard. I don't know if I can live up to these guys that you've mentioned. And obviously in between Ian, Finlay, there's Brian McKenzie as well, who was my boss and the pro there for a long time, who I've got a lot of respect for. So that's probably an even better way to end the interview than what we previously did. So Ewan, thank you very much for giving up your time. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I could sit and listen to you for another another hour or so. But I hope you stay safe. I hope everything's good with you. I hope the European Tour comes back pretty soon. And everybody that's watching, I think we all agree that this has been a great interview. So Ewan, thank you very much, and take care, and we'll see you soon, hopefully back on telly.
Thank you, and